If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. My name is Frank Lotierzo. Welcome to Gloved Fist. I'm a former fighter, part-time writer, and full-time observer. And I am joined tonight by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Jack Hirsch. Jack, not a lot to talk about as far as fights that happened last week, but we had one that has everybody buzzing. Let me welcome you into the show.
Not a lot to talk about, Frank. If we went out to dinner and they put all this steak or lasagna, let's say lasagna on your plate, and it overflowed, well, you're going to say not a lot to eat because you didn't have a couple extra vegetables. What Conlon, Frank?
You're right. Good point. What I mean was only just one fight, but that fight gave us enough that it'll fill the plate, and it could be a couple dinners. Mm. And before I pass to you, let me just say this. I didn't see the fight live. I saw it after the fact when I knew the result and read about it. So I didn't score it. So I'm not going to give a take on the scoring, but let me get your thoughts and I'll give you my thoughts, but I cannot tell you because I didn't score it other than thinking Conlon was ahead going into the last round.
Frank, I saw it on replay. I had no idea what the result was. I hadn't went online, didn't go on social media.
You're more disciplined than me.
Company, and then I got to watch it, in the evening. And I'll tell you, good thing it didn't go the distance. Because if it went the distance, there would have been a lot of controversy, the type of controversy that I didn't think would be merited, because I thought by the time they got into round 12, Lee Wood had pulled even. Now, he wasn't quite even on the official scorecards. From what I understand, he was 1 point down on 2 of the scorecards. Okay? But Conlon got off to such a magnificent start during the fight, Frank. He knocks Wood down. And he's also looking good in the second round. So after 2 rounds, he has a 3-point lead. He heard him outside of the knockdown. Conlon looked like he was on another level, okay? And you know what this made me think of, Frank? Something that Muhammad Ali would always say is something that Cus D'Amato would say. A lot of the time, the will is going to beat the skill. If you have a guy who could keep on coming, and especially you, Frank, knowing being from Philadelphia, Rocky Balboa's territory, a guy will just keep coming. And eventually that's what won it for Wood.
Jack, what I saw, I thought that Conlon showed superiority for the first 8 rounds of the fight. I thought he pretty much had the edge on almost every category. But what also stood out to me was the fact that I thought Wood looked a lot bigger. And even in those mid to early rounds, I thought he hit Conlon with some tremendous body shots, and I think that affected the second half of the fight and why Wood was able to get him in that position. However, I got to be honest, Jack, and a lot of people aren't going to like this. Neither one of those guys are really upper tier elite fighters. I mean, I don't even think they're on the level of Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward.
No. I think you're being you're being a little harsh there, Frank. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm not going to comment so much about Lee Wood, but he won the fight. So right now you have to put him a little ahead of Conlon. But just look at Conlon's background. He was an Olympian.
I know he's a 2-time Olympian, Jack. Right, he's a scrappy guy.
And he's the guy, for the people out there who might recall, who flipped the bird to one of the judges in the Olympics after a lousy decision against the Russian fighter who he had a rematch with in the pros, who he beat decisively, in the professional ranks later on. He was unbeaten. He was being promoted by Top Rank. I was at Madison Square Garden for Conlon's debut. I saw Conlon fight a number of times. He was unbeaten. He was being groomed for this. If you're going to tell me he's not on the level of a Chocolatito Gonzalez, you don't get arguments there, okay? He's not a special fighter, you can say, but to say he's not on the level of Arturo,
Jack, I don't even think it's close. I think Wood made Conlon look a lot better than he is, and I was getting frustrated, even though I knew the result of seeing Wood with his chin up in the air, getting caught with that big left hand that he was throwing from the back that he telegraphed. His corner never adjusted to it, and I just don't think they're elite. I think Wood is tough, pretty strong, and I think Conlon is scrappy, but I think Wood made him look better than he is. But Wood is a tough guy. He's strong. Wood has a lot of heart. I mean, they may fight again. I don't know how I feel about that, but I just don't think that they're elite, and I don't know what to say. It's like I just saw a lot of technical flaws. Like, again, Conlon telegraphs things. I know he's a two-time Olympian, but you know what, Jack? He's just a scrappy guy that comes to fight. He doesn't do any one thing special except the fact that he's willing. I just think that the body shots that Wood landed took a lot out of him, and that's how he froze him down the stretch.
I mean, at the end of the day, does it matter whether they're truly elite or not? They put on.
No, it was a great fight. I'm not putting them down.
There's a good chance that's going to be the fight of the year. We don't know. We have to see what unfolds the rest of the year. The year has a long way to go. You know, Wood narrowed the gap on Conlon. Going into the 11th round, I had Conlon up 1 point. I had 5 rounds apiece, but because Conlon knocked Wood down in the first round, there was your extra point. Conlon was completely dominating the 11th round. He was looking great. Then he slips, and it's called a knockdown. Now, I understand the punch was thrown. It may have been glancing. The replays were inconclusive. But even if the punch somehow grazed Conlon, that wasn't the reason he went down. You could see the way his feet spread out on a weird type angle. That wasn't a result of a punch. No, absolutely no way. So what should have been a 10-9 Conlon round now was going to be at least a 10-9 Wood round, the way I had it. But the judges probably have it 10-8. You're talking about a 3-point swing. And then there was a little bit left in the round right after that debatable knockdown. And Wood then came on. And you could tell Conlon was flustered.
The knockdown.
12. I thought Conlon was in trouble because mentally he was taken to another place.
Right. The 11th round definitely galvanized Wood, and it took a little wind out of Conlon's sail. I agree with that. But I just was getting so frustrated, Jack, watching him with his chin up and getting caught with that same shot, no adjustment in the corner. And I was thinking, now again, I knew the result. I didn't bother to score it.
Conlon or Wood getting caught with their chin up?
Wood,
okay.
Yeah, Wood was getting caught with that left hand from the southpaw stance, and I just couldn't believe you keep getting hit with that over and over, and you're walking straight in with your chin up, no adjustment or anything. So they're just not the type fighters that I really, really, really look forward to seeing or respect. And again, they're not big punchers. That's why I would say Gaddy and Ward are actually better fighters on the elite level than those two guys. But it doesn't matter. They gave us a great fight.
Mickey Ward was never quite on the elite level. He had the 3-fight classic with Gaddy, but Mickey Ward was never an elite fighter.
He was an elite body puncher, Jack, and that's one thing that those two guys don't have.
Devastating body. One of the best body punches maybe in the
that left hook to the body was awesome. And you know what? If you look at Gaddy's record, he has more impressive wins than Conlon or Wood. But I don't want to kill the fight. It was a great fight. They were willing. They both had everything on the line. Again, I have no problem with that. I just think watching the fight, I'm going to just rest my case on the fact I think Wood made Conlon look a little better than he really is.
Okay, let me ask you this, Frank. Conlon says he wants a rematch, but fighters always say that after a loss, after a brutal fight. Who do you think would win a rematch?
I think Wood would have the psychological edge. So off the top of my head, I would probably say Wood, because when I saw them in the ring, Jack, I saw Wood as being the bigger guy. He looked a little stronger. And now he goes into the rematch and he knows he can hurt Conlon. He knows he can pretty much walk through anything he throws. He got hit with his Sunday punch a lot during the fight, and he was never close to losing,
Frank,
going out or down.
10-rounder, no title on the line. If you give Conlon 2 less rounds, the less rounds you give Conlon, the better his chance.
He can hide a little bit longer and not engage. I agree. But his mindset is to engage and to go at it. So that does work for Wood.
I think when you put out the type of effort Conlon did, he gave it all he had. I mean, he fought his heart out, and Wood still got to him. And
right. Wood can improve. I don't know if Conlon can.
It's such an exhausting thing to do over again. And Wood can do it over again. He could figure, okay, I'm going to lose some rounds. I'm going to come at him.
He can improve too. He can improve his defense. He can be a little more active. And Jack, as I said last week, if Taylor was to fight Catterall again, I would take Taylor only because I don't think Catterall can complete or can repeat that performance. And if you look in guys' careers, they only have a couple really big signature performances at the elite level. So I think Taylor can improve so much. I don't think Catterall can be any better. So that would make me go with Taylor. But in this case, I think the physicality and the mindset of Wood might be a bridge too far for Michael Conlon.
Well, Ted, there's a difference involved. Taylor, no matter what you thought of the decision, and we both thought Catterall won. You had him up 1 point. I had him up 3 points. There's a difference involved. In that fight, Josh Taylor came on in the later rounds, okay? It wasn't a question of Catterall coming on, beating Taylor up, and then Taylor being lucky to get the decision. Taylor finished stronger. If anyone should be criticized of the two fighters, it's
Catterall for not closing the door. Right. He, as Teddy Atlas said, he took his foot off the gas. Exactly. But I think Taylor had a little bit to do with that, but I just think Taylor can be a lot better, and I think he's a lot better than he showed.
Yeah, I agree. One fight, Frank, it would have been really exciting if they announced it, and I would have been very surprised had it been announced. But apparently they were in serious negotiations. Al Heyman, the PBC, and Golden Boy Promotions to let 2 of their stars fight. Jamal within age, Jamal Charlo, the middleweight, within middleweight champs, against Jaime Munguia, you know, a big name guy in the Golden Boy promotion stable, unbeaten Jaime Munguia, who hasn't quite reached stardom. He knocked out Saddam Ali. He's unbeaten, a very good fighter. But if he beats Charlo, he becomes the star that he was projected to be.
Did you see what De La Hoya said today?
I try not to listen to a lot of what us.
Okay, but you got to give him credit here. He said, look, we know Charlo is the A side. Oh, we want to work with Showtime, and we'll make the fight. And I'm glad you brought this up, Jack, because you know something? I am so tired of us being teased by big-name fights that we never get, because at the last minute, business always comes in and bites it in the ass, and we don't get it. Just like there was talk this week that they were going to see, or that we might possibly get Benavidez and Plant. I love that fight.
I don't think there's much of that fight as you do. Benavidez is a clear favorite.
Benavidez would win, Jack, but I want to compare what Canelo did to him compared to what Benavidez did. But now we're not going to get that.
But that could be a little deceiving, the comparison game. I mean,
I know the triangle theory doesn't work, but I want to see Benavidez fight a guy that I saw that took Canelo rounds. Benavidez needs a big name, and you have to give Canelo credit. And I know what he's doing, but he said, they all want to fight me because I'm the money. And he's right. But they have to fight each other, because I think Canelo realizes that as big as he is and as much money as he's making, he'll never make Mayweather money for one reason. He has no rival. Mayweather had Manny Pacquiao. I think Canelo wants these guys to somebody to separate themselves from the pack, pull up and challenge him. Where like that was the case with Golovkin. Well, Golovkin is 40 now, and even though they may fight again, I don't think anybody really thinks Golovkin has a shot in that fight.
There's an X factor here that might increase in momentum as we go along. The Bivol fight might run into problems because he's a citizen of Russia. And this isn't about how you and I feel about it. We don't even have to discuss our own personal feelings. But there could be a boycott of that fight to an extent. And it could hurt pay-per-view sales just enough to not make it viable where the fight could actually fall through. I mean, Bob Arum was even talking about his guy, his light heavyweight champion, Artur Beterbiev, and he explained, unlike the Bivol situation, Beterbiev has a Canadian passport. He's been a citizen of Canada for a fair number of years, even though he was from Russia. So Beterbiev's situation's different. That fight isn't going to get boycotted, not nearly to the same extent.
Well, Jack, I'm glad you brought that up. Let me just say one thing before I touch on that to Joe Bergman. Joe, I agree with you. I think Munguia is overrated too, and Charlo would beat him. Back to Bivol. Now, the Klitschko's have been on TV a lot this weekend talking about the atrocities that are going on in Ukraine. And they are adamant that Bivol should not be allowed to fight Canelo for the title and to make a lot of money. In all honesty, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But let me just say this. I read an article by Thomas Hauser over the weekend. And Jack, he was adamant against Bivol should not be allowed to fight. And he named all the reasons that you could mention. Here's what I want to know. Did Thomas Hauser write any articles about the Olympics in Beijing? And did he have a problem with American athletes going to Beijing, China, and competing when we know all the violations they are and the human violations?
I'll just say Tom's a friend of mine and leave.
He's a friend of mine too. I talk to him. I like him. But I just would like to know if he had a problem with that.
Yeah, you know, and I'm going to tell you something too. You said it best. A certain amount of the media, for example, if they were asked to boycott a certain fight, okay, they're going to report on the Canelo fight, that they're going to be there because it's news to them once it takes place. And that's something you'd have to speak to Tom about.
Jack, here's my issue, though. Bivol has no say on what happens in Russia, and he's put the war down, but he can't put it down too much because he has family in Russia.
Let me play devil's advocate. No, Frank.
Let me finish. And he has to be careful. But here's the problem, Jack. If you or Tom Hauser or anybody else has a problem with Bivol fighting Canelo, don't buy it. Don't buy it.
Well, that's basically my philosophy. I mean, how far can you go? Take the NHL. Look at all the Russian players who are playing in the NHL. The Washington Capitals supposed to send Alex Ovechkin home because he's a Russian citizen, and at least before the war, he was a Putin supporter. Before the war took place, who knows what his thought process is now? But is the NHL supposed to send the Russian players home now?
Jack, it's a tough call. We know this much. From what we've heard, the Russian people are not for this war, but at the same time, the media is cut off there, and there are some Russian citizens that think that Ukraine is the aggressor. So they're not getting the story. My only thing is this. I don't like boycotts. I don't like cancel culture. And if anybody has a problem with Bivol fighting Canelo, don't buy the fight. You want to go to the T-Mobile Arena that night and protest? Fine. That's great. But you don't have to buy it.
Okay, Frank.
All right, Jack, there's a couple.
I don't like, listen, Frank, I don't like to comment on certain things sometimes another.
I don't like doing politics at all either, Jack. But you know what? Because the Klitschko's are being praised for their stand, and they should be. They have a lot of influence now, and I think they can influence our media. And in closing, let me just say this. I saw an interview yesterday morning. I got up at Sunday morning. I got up at 4:30. I couldn't sleep. So I turned the TV on, and I see an interview with Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko. And can I tell you something? They scared me with their demeanor. I never saw either one of those guys before a fight look so determined and mean and merciless. I've never seen that before. And I can just tell you this much. It doesn't matter what happens. They're not leaving the Kiev. They're not leaving Ukraine. And I just don't know if it's fair that they should have the influence on Bivol, who has no say over the war.
Yeah, but just let me play devil's advocate and then let's move on. All these sanctions are affecting a ton of innocent Russian people living in Russia who don't want this war, who hate the government. They're being affected by it. So should we say, no, we shouldn't have these sanctions on Russia because it's not the fault of the people?
The bottom line is, Jack, the people always get hurt. And the people in Russia now can't drink Coke or go to McDonald's because of this war. And let's just put it to bed there, because there are so many things we could say.
And this is not a sport. In Ukraine would settle for that in the snap of a finger.
This is not a political show. All right, Jack, let's talk about Edgar Berlanga. He's fighting Steve Rolls this week. Super middleweight bout. Steve Rolls is 22-1, 12 knockouts. His only loss is the Triple G back in June of 2019.
Well,
what do you think about Edgar?
This Rolls can't punch. He's not a threat. I think it's more like a showcase for Berlanga. I've seen a lot of Berlanga because he's in the area in New York. I saw him as a young fighter on the way up. Very nice kid. You want someone like him to succeed. You've been around a number of fighters, Frank, and there's certain guys you just want them to succeed. You've always kind of been rooting for them, and he's that type. You know.
Let me just say this real.
Yeah,
I agree. Let me just say this real quick. When I was in Florida, I took an Uber. We had to Uber back to the Southwest Airport. Our Uber driver, I don't know how boxing came up, but he said to me, he goes, "Did you ever hear my cousin Edgar Berlanga?" And of course, I almost, my jaw hit the floor. I said, "Absolutely, he's a great prospect." And he says, "Yeah," he goes, "He's really good. He's really good. He has a lot of ability." He said, "But you know what? He's starting to buy $50,000 watches. His girlfriend is pregnant. She moved the family in with the house, and he thinks he's getting a little too ahead of himself. And he doesn't think he's disciplined as he should be. So that's something to keep an eye on. I don't think it'd be a factor in this fight, but I do think that I do worry about his dedication a little bit."
You know what the problem is with Berlanga? He's just not that good. No matter how hard he trains.
Well, you're not, and we see you're not going to knock everybody out.
No. He's a decent fighter. He's just not world class. I've seen him on the way up. I can tell. Listen, Frank, you and I are kind of like scouts in a way. We see young fighters. We project how good they're going to be. That's how athletes are drafted. Sometimes we're fooled and someone's a lot better than we thought he'd be. And sometimes guys have disappointed us, as well. I mean, you and I are very high on a guy, for example, like Boots Ennis. But there's no guarantee he's going to be a major star. We both think he will. But in the case of Berlanga, I just don't see that much there. He's been matched carefully. He's done everything that's basically been asked of him. He had a couple of fights ago. He was basically exposed in a very tough fight. Steve Rolls has no power. Worst case scenario in all probability is that Berlanga wins on points, but he probably stops Steve Rolls.
Berlanga wants to finish him before Triple G did.
Before Triple G. It increases his marketability. But if I'm Berlanga and I can get a big fight, let's say with Canelo, let's say he knocks out Steve Rolls quick, and let's say the Bivol fight falls through and Canelo needs a big name opponent, and he can get a few million to fight Canelo, I would jump at the chance. I wouldn't think, oh, I've got to develop my skills more. He has a good manager in Keith Connolly who handles some other.
It depends on the money, Jack. I'm not sure if I agree with you. Because when I fight for the title, I want to win it.
He will lose for small money along the line while you're trying to build him to something big.
That's plausible.
He's not a blue chip prospect. You're not dealing with a Roy
But
Jones.
Jack, he's a good-looking kid with a following who can punch with either hand. Those guys don't walk in the gym every day.
He's not that good, Frank.
Okay, I'm not saying he's a world beater.
You'll see, mark my words on it. Berlanga is not going to be a world-class fighter. Like if you talk to me about someone like David Benavidez, okay, that's another matter, okay?
I agree.
There's a lot of upside. I don't know what Benavidez might disappoint you and I, Frank, and he might turn out to be a flop, might not get his dedication down.
That's a big thing.
He might lose to a very ordinary guy in his next fight. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if that happened, and I wouldn't be shocked if he became a major star either. But
Jack,
Berlanga, he has upside at least. Berlanga doesn't have that.
See, I think you're selling Berlanga a little short there. Again, I don't think he's a prospect like a Boots Ennis, but the fact is he's good looking. He can punch, and they will look out for him and protect him for a while. But let's talk about a guy who's coming up who is the real deal. And he also fights Saturday, and that's Virgil Ortiz. 18-0, 18 knockouts, 7-time national champ. Jack, I have gone off the rails talking about Boots Ennis. And I will tell you this. If you said, Frank, you could have a piece of either Boots or Virgil Ortiz, I would take Boots, but it's really close. Ortiz is the real deal. He has good fundamentals. He has a great jab. He's got power. He lets his hands go. He's a good boxer. He pressures. He's fighting this weekend Michael Kinnison, former European champ, 21-0. You want to talk about a guy that can't punch, 21-0, 2 knockouts. I'm thinking that this is a pit bull against a Chihuahua against Michael Kinnison.
I agree, Frank. I mean, you said it perfectly for both of us. I mean, he's a great, great prospect. You know, we have so many guys from life.
They won't fight. You're right.
Great prospects, and we're waiting for it to sort itself out. I know your favorite, Tank Davis. You have Devin Haney. You have Kambosos. Lomachenko, you know, is in Ukraine now. Our heart goes out to him.
Yeah, we can't say anything about Lomachenko or Usyk because we don't know what the future holds.
You have Boots Ennis. You have Terrence Crawford. Josh Taylor fell behind the rest with his last fight, so he's kind of lost contact with.
But he's one good showing away at 140 from resurrecting his persona.
But it's got to be against a good
I agree.
Name opponent. It can't just be
Jack, I'm just so tired of these guys not fighting each other. I would love to see Virgil Ortiz fight Thurman, and I would love to see Boots fight one of them, or Crawford fight Spence, or Spence fight one of them.
Still at junior welterweight, I believe. He could fluctuate junior welterweight to welterweight.
What's that again? I didn't hear you.
I think he's a junior welter, basically.
Who?
Ortiz, more of a junior welter than a welter right now. But it's like splitting hairs. He could easily fight in both divisions.
I think he's more welterweight, but it's like either way, he could fight both divisions. I think he would run through the junior welterweights. But there's a guy that has all the talent in the world. I want to see him fight. And, you know, I blame Mayweather for a lot of this because everybody wants to be undefeated, have the perfect record.
Again, Frank.
No, Jack, but I'm going to back off of that in this case. I can't continue to blame.
In the restaurant, you probably blame Mayweather.
I can't blame Mayweather for all of these guys. I think he set the template, but I can't blame him for all this stuff. But it's like these guys, don't they understand that nothing is better, and there's nothing that builds their pedigree more than when they give us fights that we want to see and they're competitive. And if they realize, if it's like, if you take the 80s, you don't have to go undefeated. Nobody beats the best of the best.
Right.
But give us some good fights. And Joe, I saw that too. Spence says he wants Crawford. If he beats the guys, I'll believe it when I see it.
It's not worth talking, but I have a late bulletin for you, Frank. What's your opinion on this one? I'm serious. Amir Khan says he's planning to invoke his rematch clause against Kell Brook. There was a rematch clause. Amir Khan invoke it. Man,
I think Kell Brook will beat him up again
in that fight. If Kell Brook is totally bummed out and decides, I just can't train for this guy, if he's so unmotivated, I mean, come on, is he kidding? Who would want to?
Jack, look, you and I both know it's just a payday. And like you said, maybe he catches him off. I don't think he matches up with him stylistically.
No. Stops him again.
You're right. I agree. He doesn't match up with him physically or stylistically. It's probably just a payday. But Jack, let's talk about our highlight fighter, a guy that matched up with everybody. I'm going to kick it to you. You start, and I'll just take the baton. Yesterday is 1 year that middleweight champ Marvin Hagler passed away. 62, 3-2, 52 knockouts, middleweight champ for 7 years. Jack, take it from there.
You know, people don't realize about the great Marvin Hagler. He gained in popularity only the last 2 years of his career. I mean, he was well known before then, but he became a major star when he knocked out Tommy Hearns in that sensational 3-round fight in 1985. Before that, he came up the hard way. You know, originally born in Newark, then settled in Brockton, Massachusetts, was trained by the Petronelli brothers. He went to Philadelphia. He went to your turf, Frank. I mean, you saw him early in his career where he fought the tough fighters in Philadelphia on the way up that no one else would want to fight.
And he fought Sugar Ray Seals 3 times before he won the title. Nobody talks about the murderer's row that Hagler fought on the way up before he fought Anafermo in 79.
Willie Monroe, okay, he fought
3 times.
Boogaloo Watts. Then he
twice
in Philly. I mean, he did it the hard way.
Cyclone Hart.
And Cyclone Hart. I'll tell you, Russell Peltz is a great promoter, but I'd never sign him as a scout because he was offered the chance to promote Hagler early in his career. And he said, well, what could I do with Marvin Hagler? So he always, he laughs about it now.
But Jack, in his defense, he was there the night that Willie Monroe clearly beat Hagler in 76. And at that time, he was promoting Monroe, and he probably thought at that time he probably had the better guy.
You know,
I'll give him half a pass there.
You were at that fight, right, Frank, in the snow.
Yes. And Hagler lost that fight and admitted in all the Philadelphia papers the next day that he clearly lost, but he would gain from that and he would come back. And he did. He beat Monroe twice after that, stopped them both times.
That's the only fight of Hagler's career where he lost and the decision wasn't debatable. The only fight in his career, we could feel that Sugar Ray Leonard beat Hagler. I do, you do. A lot of people don't, but it's debatable at least.
I was at the Watts fight. That was a hometown decision.
Right. And then the fight he lost against Watts supposedly was a bad decision. And he fought, like you said, Sugar Ray Seals 3 times. One fight was a draw. He beat him decision. Another stopped him in 1 round. There was the Antifermo fight, in which I'm going to tell you, Frank, we'll talk more about Vito Antifermo at a later date because I was his old
I want to hear what you're going to say because I have thoughts on that first fight.
Spotlight Vito, the first fight.
No, but let's talk about the Hagler fight. What were you going to say?
No. Well, the Hagler fight, too, showed how the certain durability he had mentally, Hagler, because it was such a long haul for him to get a title fight. And the reason he finally got Antifermo in the ring, he had political pressure. Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts, Senator Ted Kennedy.
Right.
They basically threatened an investigation into boxing unless their constituent, Marvin Hagler, got a title shot. And he gets the title shot with Vito Antifermo. And the majority of people who watched that fight thought Hagler won the fight, should have gotten the decision. It was called a draw, which meant Hagler would have to wait some more. It was supposed to be his crowning time, regardless of what you think of the decision. The point is Hagler had to wait some more, and then he gets a shot in England. He has to go to Alan Minter's country in England. He destroys him in 3 rounds, and then starts one of the great middleweight reigns of all time. That, you know,
Jack, you know something? I don't have a huge problem with the draw with Anafermo. I watched it live that night, and I've watched it a few times. Hagler kind of faded down the stretch after the 8th round. If you're going to go by points, and I have to pick a winner, I think Hagler probably pulled it out. But he didn't dominate Anafermo like he said he was. And you know what hurt Hagler, Jack? All week, he's walking around with the fly swatter saying, I'm going to swat Vito the Mosquito. And everybody thought that Hagler was just going to walk in and do to him what he did to Hampshire, and it didn't happen that way. Vito walked through hell and actually wore him down the stretch.
I'm going to say something about Lee Groves. I talked with Lee Groves about this, not so much about his comment now. I'm not going to comment on that, but I talked with Lee Groves, who's a friend of mine, about the Hagler-Anafermo fight. And Lee Groves does the CompuBox by the numbers. And he's looked up a lot of old fights. And if I'm not mistaken, Lee told me Hagler landed 23 more punches than Vito in the entire fight. That's only a punch and a half a round. And he said in power punches, Vito had a higher connect rate. But of course, that could be deceiving because Vito wasn't a hard puncher and Hagler was a hard puncher.
I don't think that's the be-all, end-all, Jack, but I rest my case. That fight was a lot closer than people think.
Hagler should have closed the deal. How much have we talked about certain fights? Even though we might think one fighter maybe deserved a decision, he could have put it beyond doubt. Close the darn deal. Close the show. Don't fade in the late rounds and then say, well, I had a big
You have
lead.
nobody else but yourself to blame. But what I like about Hagler, Jack? Look, it's funny how some fighters just captivate other people and they blow them away. Mayweather, Hagler. It's funny. There is not one thing not to like about Marvin Hagler as a fighter, but he was never my favorite. For some reason, I just never liked him as much as I liked Duran, Hearns, Leonard, or Michael Spinks. But I will tell you this about Hagler. He was a different guy stylistically almost every fight. His best punch was his jab, but there really wasn't anything that he couldn't do, and he could morph into whatever he had to be on a certain night against a certain guy. Look, he didn't do that great against Duran. I think Duran kind of showed the book on how to beat him, make him fight as the aggressor, counter him with the lead right, and I think that's why Leonard came out. But Hagler was...
Frank, if he came out the same way against Leonard, with the same intensity and mindset that he had against Tommy Hearns, does Leonard win that fight?
Jack, I knew you were going to say that. I don't think he could come out against Leonard like he did Hearns because Leonard would make him look bad trying to chase him all over the ring. If you go back and look at Hagler's career, and if you think about it, it's one of the best adjustments a fighter ever made for a big fight. But then if you go a little deeper, you realize Hagler had no choice. When he decided to come after Hearns and force it on the inside, one, he knew he was going to have to eat some right hands, but he believed he had the chin to do it. And basically, that was the difference in the fight. He knew he could not beat Hearns outside and boxing. He had to make it a street fight, force it on the inside. He did that from the jump. And that was one of the best strategic moves I've seen by a world-class fighter in a big fight throughout my life following boxing. But no, I don't think that works against Leonard, Jack. Leonard's a completely different fighter.
Let's say we had a different way of scoring boxing, and fights were scored as one big round. We didn't
like a movie, like you're watching a movie.
One big round. Does Hagler deserve the decision over Leonard? If it's one big round. We just score, we just pick a winner. We don't, do it on a round basis.
Jack, I can only go by this. I watched the fight live on closed circuit that night. I don't think it was as close as some people thought. There was not a doubt in my mind that Leonard won the fight and he would get the decision. I think watching that fight live, when you don't know the result and what's going on, Leonard was so much quicker. He actually won exchanges against the ropes when he fought Hagler. I think Leonard clearly won the fight, but when I watch it on film over the years, it gets a little closer, but I don't think there's a case for Hagler. And he gave away the first 4 rounds. He did not win 7 of the last 8.
Lee Groves went back to the stats with the Antifermo Hagler fight. 23 more punches were landed by Hagler. They landed the same amount of power shots. So 23 punches is a lot, but if over 15 rounds, it's a punch and a half a round. It's 1 or 2 punches more per round. So you can make a good argument. Yeah, Hagler deserves.
The difference was, though, Hagler's punches did land clean, and they were ooh-ah shots where Vito was pushing it on the inside, and they were short hooks and uppercuts that he was landing. They're not quite as eye-catchy. Again, Lee apparently agrees that Hagler was a victim of the expectation game, because all week in the lead up of the fight out in Vegas, I'm going to squat Vito the Mosquito, and he derided Vito at every turn. And I think the fact that Vito was in the fight made it look even bigger. And I even think that might have been the case in the Leonard fight, that Hagler, almost a 4-1 favorite, everybody thought Hagler was going to win. And I think each round that Leonard went and came out and actually had success made it look even bigger than it was. Leonard just didn't win the fight. He won the night and he won the event.
Yeah, but as time goes by, things change from the night of the actual fights. I mean, someone can create a scenario and the public kind of believes it. Like later, we'll talk anniversary fight, a little later on. But you take the fight of the century, Ali and Frazier. We both know Frazier won the fight. He obviously won the fight. But Ali convinced a lot of people in the aftermath that he won the fight. It was like a political campaign.
Ali was the best salesman we've ever had, though, Jack. So nobody else could do that.
Yeah, but that's what kind of happens. And because Sugar Ray seems to be less liked, at least at the time, than Hagler, maybe because Leonard had the flash. People were going on and on. Oh, what a terrible decision. Hagler deserved to win. And
no, I don't see that at all.
Yeah, no, well, but I'm just saying public perception.
Hagler gave away the first 4 rounds of the fight. And he did not win 7 of the last 8. And the other thing is this. Everybody talks, when they see Marvin Hagler, Jack, they see a bald-headed guy that looks like if you stabbed him with a knife, the knife would break because he's so shredded. But he was not a seek and destroy fighter like a Mike Tyson. He was more of a skilled boxer, and he was never great at cutting off the ring. Leonard moved around the ring and basically slid and glid and did whatever he wanted while he had his wheels underneath him. And then you take into account, Leonard only fought once in 5 years. Well, that hurt Hagler.
Yeah. Who wins between Hagler and Monzon?
Boy, they're the 2 best middleweights of my lifetime, Jack. If you put my back against the wall, I think Monzon's jab might be the difference. And I think he would force Hagler to fight as the aggressor. And I think Monzon's jab, reach, and style and chin I would tilt towards Monzon in a very close decision.
I think I would go with Hagler on a very close decision. I think
it's not going to be a knockout.
Reaction, right? Very close fight, and
that's basically what I said. Lee Monzon knew how to fight tall, and he could have tied Hagler up. Now, I'll give you a little insight there. I used to ask Benny Briscoe that. Now, he fought prime Monzon, and he fought a near prime Hagler, but only when Benny was old. And you could tell that he didn't like committing either way. But the one time it was myself, Roger Stafford, Tex Cobb, Johnny Cooper, George Benton. We were talking about that fight, and we said this is in this is in probably 81. And Benny said, I think Monzon would beat him. He goes, and if they fought in Argentina, Monzon would win every round.
Well, that's extreme.
Right, but I could just tell he felt Monzon was a little better. I get the impression, and I was at the Hagler-Briscoe fight, I get the impression that Benny wasn't all that impressed with Hagler back in 78.
Well, Briscoe was a bit past his peak when he fought Hagler.
Yes.
Yeah, so that wasn't the same Benny Briscoe.
But Hagler was on the ascend at that time.
Right, one guy's on the way up, the other guy on the way down. Benny in his prime would have given Hagler a very stiff argument.
Jack, think about this. Before we go to the fight of the century, think about this. Marvin Hagler was 13-1-1 in title fights with, I believe, 10 knockouts. And look at the fight we're talking about. His last fight where he didn't get the decision. It's just amazing how the result means so much.
But listen, guys have defining fights throughout their career. Some guys aren't lucky enough to have a defining fight. You're very lucky if you have, I should call it a legacy fight, okay? Not everyone has a legacy fight, but for some guys, it works backwards. The great Alexis Arguello, his legacy fights with Aaron Pryor, unfortunately for him. People, even though that elevates Arguello's name, it doesn't elevate how great a fighter he truly was. It actually takes away from it.
The people that know boxing, Jack, it doesn't work because we knew Arguello was not really a full-fledged junior welterweight, just like Michael Spinks did not belong in the ring with Mike Tyson.
How many people truly know boxing? They just get impressions, names, fans.
Well, the casuals go by that, yes.
Right, exactly. And, some fighters are lucky to have several legacy fights, like Muhammad
Ali and Leonard.
Like Frazier, Liston, and Foreman. 3 opponents were major legacy opponents. Leonard had Hearns, Hagler, Duran. 3 legacy opponents. They take you up to another level. I mean, and some guys just aren't lucky enough to quite have that. I'll give you an example. You mentioned the Klitschko's before. Vladimir Klitschko didn't have a legacy opponent his whole career to be in a super fight. Okay?
No, you look back now, the 2 biggest opponents he fought were Joshua and Fury, and he lost both.
Right. Holyfield had Tyson and Riddick Bowe. He had those legacy opponents over there. Some guys have them. Some guys aren't as fortunate. You could even talk about a guy like Floyd Patterson. His legacy opponent was Ingemar Johansson. I mean, yeah, so some guys.
But Liston overshadowed that, and that's what I was going to say to Lee. Right. Lee says that Hagler's legacy fight was Hearns. I agree with that until he fought Leonard, and then it changed.
Okay, so which one was a bigger legacy fight for Hagler? Was it the Hearns fight or the Leonard fight? What do people talk about more when it comes to Hagler? If we're sitting down with a bunch of guys like in a bar and we have to talk Marvin Hagler all night, his fights, his career, are we going to talk more about the Hearns fight or the Leonard fight?
I don't know, Jack, because the Leonard fight was bigger. The Hearns fight, he was more impressive. And I mean, I guess it depends if you're a major Hagler fan or not, but I will just say this. The Hearns fight enabled the Leonard fight, but think about this. What if Hagler wins a decision? Everybody would have him ranked over Monzon. Think about that. That split decision loss hurt his persona. If Hagler wins a split decision, nobody picks Monzon to beat him.
If Hagler got the split decision against Leonard, it would have been very controversial. He would have been pretty ticked off because all he would have heard was people say Leonard got robbed. Okay? It would have worked backwards, and maybe his pride would have forced him to have a rematch with Leonard. That's kind of my feeling. They would have done it again. There would have been big money. Would Leonard have gone into an immediate rematch if he didn't get the decision? I don't think so. I'll tell you why. Because Leonard, I believe him when he said he just wanted to show he could compete. He would have been satisfied, Leonard, if he lost the split decision, but he performed magnificently. That was the main thing for Leonard, how he performed more than even the result.
I think Leonard always wanted Hagler's name on his resume, Jack. I think he waited till the right time. Remember, back then he was doing the HBO commentary for all of Hagler's fights. I think he knew how to fight him. I think after the Duran fight, and Duran told him, you can beat him, I think that went a long way with Leonard. And I think at the end of the day, Hagler's biggest fight and the most recognized opponent he ever fought was Ray Leonard. And I think that's the fight that people think about even more.
Anniversary fight. Yeah, a couple of minutes of it. Obviously, the biggest fight of all time. I heard you, by the way, on Randy's Ringside talk about the fight of the century, Ali and Frazier. You guys did a great job, in that show. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Jack, there's really not too much to say that hasn't been said about the Ali Frazier fight of the century. But I'm going to tell you, and I think I said it on Randy's show, but here's the thing that sticks out to me as much. I believe, it's my personal opinion, and to me what stands out the most about that fight actually happened before the fight. And I remember in the weeks leading up to that fight and on the night of the fight, we were both there, but we were both young kids. The thing that stands out to me the most is before the bell for the first round, I couldn't picture either guy losing. I tried to envision, is Ali going to let Frazier beat him as bad as he derided Frazier in the build-up to this fight? And conversely, Frazier knew his legacy depended on winning that fight. And Jack, there's never been a sporting event or a boxing match or anything in my life where I went into it saying, I can't picture either guy losing. You could name any fight of our lifetime, and I could make a case for one of the guys winning and the other guy losing and vice versa. Ali Frazier won. I couldn't picture either one losing, and I knew on March 9th, one of those two men would have a defeat on the record.
I was in high school at the time, Frank, and I picked Frazier to stop Ali in 12 rounds. I thought Ali would be winning on points, but Frazier was like a machine. I thought he would just wear Ali down, eventually get to him. And it kind of in a way that he did Buster Mathis, but I thought Ali would be doing better than Mathis did to that point.
And he was.
Eventually the nonstop pressure would get to him. And that's what basically happened, Frank. When he had Ali staggering all over the ring in round 11 and Ali came out for round 12, my prediction looked right on the money, the 12th round stoppage.
But Joe kind of took a little rest in that round, even though he won it.
Yeah, I don't go for that in the 11th round that Frazier didn't do all he could to get Ali out.
No, he tried to get him. He couldn't finish him. He tried. I agree.
Don't listen to this nonsense about a long walk. Why he didn't follow up on it.
Right. No, he tried to take his head off. He chased him all over the ring.
Right, but the way Ali was zagging around, it was hard.
Oh, Ali was in trouble.
A clean shot on him. Right. But Ali being Ali, he survived. One thing about Ali throughout his career that people don't talk about, you could hurt him, and he kind of fought well when he was hurt. He could bounce back from being hurt. Look, from early in his career when Sonny Banks and Henry Cooper knocked him down, he stopped both guys. The next round, he got him out of there. Against Frazier, even in the 15th when he got knocked down, by the end of the round, Ali was just in as good a shape as Frazier was. Both
Arthur McCanny said he thought if there was a 16th round, he thought Ali was actually in better shape for it.
Want to know something? I kind of agree with that, Frank.
I don't think that's a reach.
I think if, no one ever talked if it were a fight to the finish, okay, who would have won? I kind of feel Ali would have won if it were a fight to the finish.
Maybe on that night, if there were a couple more rounds to go.
Let's say it never ended. One guy had to be counted out. I think Joe put everything he had into it. They were going to have to retire Frazier on the stool at the end of the 18th, 19th round. They would have been so exhausted as Ali, beaten up. But I think Ali would have outlasted him in that scenario.
I don't think that's a reach. Jack, let me touch on two things. I agree with Joe Bergman. I think if Leonard and Hagler fight a rematch, I think Hagler probably wins. And Lee, you're right. After 10 rounds, the fight of the century was pretty much up for grabs. The thing that hurt Ali was Frazier won 4 of the last 5 rounds. Ali only won the 14th. And what fascinated me about that fight, Jack, and I was with you, I picked Frazier to win that fight too. Even as a 12-year-old, I just felt that Frazier grasped their style clash better. Where Ali thought Frazier would be like Chuvalo. He didn't take into account that Frazier came in low, a moving target. Frazier always said, I'm going to make you punch down, and when you do, I have something for you. Ali, he had to punch down, his chin's open, never carried his right high. He ate the left hook. I just always felt that Frazier had the stylistic edge and understood it, and Ali did not. And that's why I've said this, and you know that. You see me say it. Frazier of March 8th, 1971, I believe, beats any version of Muhammad Ali that we ever saw the first time they fight.
I disagree. I think the best of Ali, and we're talking about who fought Cleveland Williams and Ernie Terrell, wins a close decision over Frazier, close fight, because I think there were a few rounds in that fight where Ali, wouldn't have had to be lying on the ropes the way he did. He would have moved more, the extra little speed. I think Ali would have. I remember thinking that night at the end, what would have happened? And I remember thinking Ali probably would have won a decision 8 rounds to 6 and one even legitimate decision along and not get knocked down. It would have been like a close type fight. But
against Joe Frazier 68, I agree. But Joe Frazier 77, I don't think any version that we saw
71
Ali beats him the first time they fight. Just because of the style contrast. And the reason why I say this is this, and you've seen me post this before, George Chuvalo gave Ali his toughest fight in the 60s. If George Chuvalo could get Ali against the ropes and to the corner when he had lightning speed, Joe Frazier, who's harder to hit, comes in faster, hits harder, better puncher, and even more aggressive than Chuvalo. I just think if Chuvalo could have rounds like that against Ali, I think Frazier of 71 would get the job done. But if Ali's never exiled and they fight in 68 or 69, I think Ali may have been better than we ever saw him, and we know Frazier wasn't as good in 69 as he was in 71.
Yeah, when would they have fought? If Ali wasn't exiled, if there wasn't a problem.
Frazier was the number 1 contender, Jack, by 68.
Would he have fought him? I don't think he would.
I think 69.
Probably 69, I would say. The reason I'm not saying 68 actually because Frazier didn't enter the WBA tournament in the summer of 67. So if he wasn't ready for that, he wasn't going to be ready for Ali. Maybe 2 years later, maybe around the time he fought Jerry Quarry.
I think that's the Frazier that would have fought Ali.
Right, he would have given it a go, and
and that was Frazier who was peaking and on the ascend, and that's still not an easy fight for Ali. But I do think Ali, the way he filled out, I think it would have made a difference. And I just think if they fight in 69 and Ali doesn't have the 43-month layoff, I think he might win. But Jack, I'll close with this. Joe Frazier on March 8th, 1971 was better prepared mentally, physically, and emotionally than any other big-time, all-time great fighter going into a signature fight like he was. There was nothing Ali could have done that Frazier wasn't ready for, and I've always said this in closing. That fight for Ali was 10 times harder than he ever envisioned it. And for Frazier, he made it to be such a monster, it could have never been as hard as he made it in his head.
Good points, Frank. Okay, we'll continue this next week. I had a blast like normally.
Great show, Jack. Thanks. Thanks for the comments, guys.